Oscar Pistorius is now under house arrest following his release from prison. VOA's Jackson Mvunganye just returned from a trip to West Africa. He'll join us to talk about the region's post-Ebola recovery. And the new trailer for Star Wars: The Force Awakens debuts and breaks the internet. Africa 54 starts right now.
Hello, I'm Lenore Moudou. Vincent Makori is on assignment. This is Africa 54. Former South African track star Oscar Pistorius is now under house arrest after being released from a Pretoria prison one day earlier than expected. Prison officials released the disgraced former Olympian Monday night under the cover of darkness in an attempt to avoid a media frenzy that has followed Pistorius since his shocking arrest for the murder of his former girlfriend, Riva Steenkamp. For more details on the release of Pistorius, we go to Johannesburg, South Africa, where VOA's Anita Powell is standing by live via Skype. Good evening, Anita.
Hi, Lenore.
Now, why was Oscar Pistorius released a day early?
So technically, the Department of Correctional Services says it's at their discretion when to release people on parole. Technically, he was only released about 2 hours short of midnight, around 10 p.m. Local time, and he was supposed to be released on Tuesday. He was just released a few hours early. They said it's up to them, but it seems reasonable that they just let him out because they wanted to avoid the media frenzy.
But what are the terms of his release?
So his family was very clear to say this is not release. This is a transfer from one sort of prison to another. He'll be under house arrest. He has to undergo psychotherapy and community service for the rest of his 5-year sentence.
Okay, so we hear that he's up for appeal on November 3rd. What is that about?
So that is a different issue. The prosecution says that Judge Thokozile Masipa made a legal error when she convicted him only of culpable homicide, which is basically your manslaughter. So they're challenging that. And so we may see a change in the verdict. And
how are people reacting to his early release, if we can call it that?
So we're seeing a range of reactions in South Africa, and they range for, he has supporters here. His family's very glad and relieved that he's out. They range from that to indifference, people saying, we have other things to worry about in South Africa, and then to outrage, people who say it wasn't enough.
It wasn't enough. What were people really looking forward to in terms of the verdict? Did you talk to some people? What were their reactions?
Right, so many people in South Africa, and I'm just talking about ordinary South Africans on the street, said at the time that they believed he should have been convicted of murder. But South Africa doesn't have a jury system. All these verdicts are decided by judges, and Judge Thokozile Masipa disagreed that he was willfully responsible for the death of Riva Steenkamp. So she and the South African public largely disagree on this one.
How is the family reacting to all of this that is happening to Oscar?
Well, so his family released a very short statement today saying that they really weren't going to say much. They weren't going to answer questions. Clearly, they are relieved. But this has been a trying year, not just for Oscar Pistorius. This has been a trying 2 years, rather, for the entire Pistorius family. The media has been basically on them since day one, and so one imagines that they're still feeling very much under the glare of the world.
And Anita, has anyone seen Oscars after his release?
No, and I think that is the one thing that everybody wishes they could see. Everybody's curious about that, but nobody has seen him, and that was partially the reason for taking him out under the cover of darkness. He hasn't been seen, but the family spokeswoman did confirm that he is inside his uncle's house.
Any words on if he will continue to exercise and do his athletic,
Well, it's important to note that he has been banned from international competition for the rest of his 5-year sentence. So while he is possibly free to train, he has a gym at his uncle's house, we won't be seeing Oscar Pistorius on the track competing. No.
Okay. Well, Anita, thank you so much for joining us. And that was VOA's Anita Powell reporting live via Skype from Johannesburg, South Africa. Now, Guinea is the last country in West Africa where people are still getting sick from Ebola. VOA's Chris Stein reports on how health authorities are rallying traditional healers to help in the fight against the disease.
Mori Karoma says he will cure what ails you from the van he parks along a busy roadside in Guinea's capital, Conakry. Karoma offers traditional medicines to treat common ailments, even if the ailment is fever, one of the first symptoms of the Ebola virus.
For those who are complaining of having fever and they come to my place, what we normally give them is this one and that one over there in the bottle.
Guinea was the first country in West Africa in which Ebola broke out, and the last country in the region where people are still getting the virus. The virus killed more than 11,300 people, mostly in Guinea and in nearby Sierra Leone and Liberia. While its neighbors have managed to get rid of the disease, 2 new Ebola cases were reported last week in Guinea. After the virus broke out in 2013, the national coordinator of Guinea's fight against Ebola, Dr. Sakoba Keita, said the government realized if it was going to beat the disease, it needed to get traditional healers on board.
More than
10 of them had already died because of their treating of Ebola cases. Mainstream science doesn't support the idea that traditional healers can treat Ebola. So we met with the traditional healers, and we trained around 1,500 of them in measures of prevention and detection in Ebola cases.
Mamadi Nabe is president of Guinea's Union of Traditional Healers. He says before the government intervened, most traditional doctors did not have the equipment to protect them from a disease that is transmitted through infected bodily fluids.
Before, we were sensitized. We didn't have the hygiene kits. We didn't have infrared thermometers. We didn't have gloves.
Thanks to the sensitization efforts, this Ebola treatment center in Conakry is nearly empty. But as the recent cases show, the country still has much to do to defeat the disease entirely. Chris Stein for VOA News, Conakry, Guinea.
Now, deadly clashes in central Somalia Monday killed at least 14 people and wounded 20 others, according to witnesses and local officials. Witnesses say rival clan militias engaged in street battles in the town of Beledweyne following a dispute over tax collection. Beledweyne is 335 kilometers north of Mogadishu. Most of the wounded are said to be civilians caught in the crossfire. Croatia reopened its border with Serbia late Monday afternoon, allowing passage to about 3,000 migrants who had spent nearly 2 days in cold and rain. A large number of migrants have been stranded in Serbia after Hungary sealed its borders. Thousands of people, most of them from Syria, have been forced to take a longer route through Slovenia on their way to Germany and other Western destinations. VOA's Latika Hoke has more.
Thousands of people reached the Slovenian border Monday, where authorities controlled the rate of entry. For some wet, cold and exhausted people, the wait was just too long.
If you have a heart, open the door. The kids want to die in the air, please.
The UN Refugee Agency ran out of supplies Monday as it tried to accommodate at least 2,500 people stranded at Serbia's border with Croatia.
We are waiting now for the trucks to bring more supplies. People are cold and wet. The situation is terrible.
A Serbian official told reporters at the border that his country is doing all it can to help people waiting to cross.
They have enough food, enough medications, and enough doctors. But I can repeat again that this is not a solution. Serbia can't solve this on its own.
Croatian Prime Minister Zoran Milanovic reprimanded Hungary for creating the backlog by sealing its borders with the 2 Balkan countries.
And you've already seen what Berlin had told the Hungarian government, that going about it that way only makes the situation worse. So it's the clearest message to Budapest and their friends and errand boys in Croatia how the biggest and most humane power sees this.
After visiting a migrant camp at Slovakia's border with Hungary, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon thanked that country as well as Austria for accommodating a large number of migrants.
I know that each and every country has very serious political, economic, social challenges in accommodating these people. But at the same time, we should know that they are the people who are fleeing the war and persecutions.
As the Balkan countries struggle to process the migrants already on their soil, about 5,000 new ones arrive every day. Zlarica Hope, VOA News, Washington.
FIFA's executive committee held an extraordinary session in Zurich on Tuesday. Outgoing President Sepp Blatter and UEFA chief Michel Platini were handed 90-day suspensions by soccer's governing body amid corruption allegations. Both men deny any wrongdoing. Issa Hayatou, president of the Confederation of African Football, was automatically appointed as FIFA acting president. Hayatou is the longest-service vice president on FIFA's executive committee. The FIFA set October 26 as deadline for submission of candidates for the office of FIFA president before the elections are held in February. Now, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, VOA's Jackson Vunganyi talks about post-Ebola recovery in West Africa. Stay with us.
This is Greenbeat for a healthier planet.
Researchers in New York and Greenland are trying to find out why a huge glacier has begun retreating at an unprecedented pace over the last 15 years. And they've enlisted a group of seals to help. The ringed seals are able to go where boats cannot, in and around the Jakobsen Glacier in Greenland's Ilulissat ice fjord. David Holland is a professor of mathematics at New York University. He says the seals can go as deep as 500 meters.
They transition from the surface to the deep, warm waters, and that's what's really important to see that.
The seals are outfitted with devices that measure the depth, temperature, and salinity of water.
If the water is warm, the glaciers retreat, but as they retreat, they calve ice and sea level rises.
Holland says if parts of Greenland and Antarctica were to retreat, sea levels could go up by a meter within a century and have a huge impact on coastal cities, including New York. I'm Rebecca Ward for VOA's Green Beat.
Welcome back. Almost a year and a half later, the Ebola epidemic in 3 West African countries of Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone is all but over. Liberia was declared Ebola-free, while Sierra Leone is on the path to be declared Ebola-free. VOA's Jackson Vunganyi was recently in Liberia and Sierra Leone to look at the impact of Ebola on both countries. Jackson is joining us in the studio to tell us more. Jackson, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lenore.
So how was the situation in both countries when you went there, and why did it take so long for governments really to respond in terms of containing the infection?
Well, life is relatively back to normal in both countries that I visited. I was in Monrovia for about 5 days and in Freetown for about 2 days. And life is gotten back to, the relative normality. And why it took long for them to respond to the situation? Well, for starters, there was a bit of suspicion from these two communities. They don't really believe what the government tells them. Face value, and in Liberia, it was after the death of a leading politician that people started, recognizing that this was a problem, that they should be worried. In Freetown, in Sierra Leone, actually, the whole of Sierra Leone, it was after the death of 2 leading doctors that passed away because of contracting Ebola through, helping out people who had, the disease. The situation is getting back to normal. Most people feel like the rough days are behind them. Sierra Leone is counting down. I think it has a little over 20 days to be considered Ebola-free, declared Ebola-free by the WHO. And when I spoke to the spokesman, the government spokesman, Abdoulaye Berete, he told me this.
Okay.
We are exercising an optimism of caution, because the President, Dr. Vincent Makori, in all his broadcasts, has indicated that even though we are on a countdown, we must be mindful that Ebola is still with us, and we must not compromise both the medical measures that we have put in place as a government, as well as hyping up on the social mobilization. So far, that is where we are, and the country, everybody is on us with that, so that we'll make sure collectively as a nation, once we are declared free, we can celebrate together.
So what did Mr. Barete say in terms of some of the lessons learned with regards to responding to future health crises?
Well, they learned that, first of all, they need a robust healthcare system. They learned that they have to have a better communication with their citizens. Some of the issues they are tackling specifically is they have been educating the healthcare workers in how to handle some of these cases of Ebola. They've gone to traditional healers and traditional leaders in their communities and told them that they have to be very cautious. They've trained them. They have set up a toll-free number, 117. If you suspect somebody has Ebola, you call that toll-free numbers and they will dispatch healthcare workers to come and respond. They've also instituted what they call barrier teams, safe barrier teams who come and collect people who have passed away because of Ebola and bury them in a safe place.
Now, it's interesting that you mentioned traditional healers because we saw earlier in the piece that in Guinea, basically the message was, be careful, do not try to treat Ebola on your own. Right. What was the message?
Well, they have to work. There's a concerted effort to reach out to these traditional healers. These are communities that strongly use community healers, in Liberia, in Guinea and Sierra Leone, community healers or traditional doctors are very much used by people who have, whatever ailment they have, they'll go to them. And during the crisis, the Ebola crisis, many of them went to visit their traditional healers, and because of that, they did not receive adequate medical care. So what they're partnering with them and telling them, if you have somebody who you suspect to have Ebola, send them to us or call us so that we can respond. Do not take the matters into your own hands anymore.
What were some of your observations in terms of the lasting effects of Ebola on these communities?
Some of the lasting effects, I believe, that they will have to deal with for a long time is stigma. Many people still live under the shadows of Ebola. The people who are the first responders, unfortunately, the nurses, women, mothers in their families and their communities are stigmatized if they came in contact with Ebola at any point. And so that is one of the residual effects that they will have to deal with at a long time.
And quickly, tell us about one or two strategies that they're put in place.
Well, there are a couple of strategies, the post-Ebola recovery strategies that both countries are putting in place. One is that they're going to revamp the economy. In some places in Western Sierra Leone, they're giving away cash handouts. It's a pilot program that is being supported by the World Bank, where the government is giving cash to families that are living below poverty line. And they're also trying to find a way to streamline service delivery in many of these communities where healthcare had really broken down.
Okay, well, excellent reporting, Jackson.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. And our thanks to VOA's Jackson Vunganyi. Now, the sport of cycling has steadily built a following in East Africa in recent years. It doesn't hurt that two-time Tour de France winner Chris Froome was born in Kenya and trained by one of Africa's best cyclists, David Kenja. And now the town of Machakos, about 50 kilometers southeast of Nairobi, is trying to become Kenya's and perhaps East Africa's cycling hub. VOA's Jill Craig has more from Machakos.
They make it look easy, but at elevations of 1,000 to 1,600 meters above sea level, cycling these hills is anything but effortless. That challenge makes Machakos County, Kenya, a showcase venue for the abilities of East African cyclists during the second annual Tour de Machakos. 23-year-old Cyrus Wambua is one of those riders. Born and raised in Machakos, Wambua has been riding since he was a child. He says his mother encouraged him to start.
My mother got inspired by that strong guy from the Tour de France, the Lance Armstrong. So he used to read documentaries, and when we were small kids, he used to tell us that one day you'll race like Lance Armstrong.
Uganda's national cycling coach, Jesper Fiedla, says this is one reason why Kenya's and East Africa's cycling community has continued to grow over the years.
Partly it's the exposure on TV. More people can watch these races on TV, and then the more people who are riding around in the different towns around East Africa, the exposure is just bigger, so people, they see and they say, maybe we should pick up the sport.
Race organizer Alex Tibwita says Machakos has it all. Nice hills, well-maintained roads, good descents, and a government that supports the cycling community.
I'm pretty confident that with the right nurturing, this is definitely the best place to base a center of cycling in Kenya and probably in East Africa.
Some of the best marathoners in the world either live or train in the Kenyan towns of Eldoret and Iten, locations that are known for their high elevations. Some cyclists think Machakos could eventually have that same reputation.
So definitely this is a perfect place. If somebody wanted to build a camp up in the hills at maybe 2,100 meters, you're more or less at the same level like, let's say, Iten. So for sure, this could be a new cycle hub as well. That's a perfect setting here. Perfect, really good.
And for cyclists like Wambua, that would be very good news indeed.
I like cycling so much because as a sport, it always keeps you busy, and that you avoid bad companies, you don't take drugs. Even on the other side, it's a source of living. You can earn something from the cycling event and you push your family, you do your things, and that's all.
The Tour de Machakos is the biggest road race in Kenya, covering 400 kilometers around Machakos County. This year, there were 130 registered cyclists, double the number from last year. Jill Craig, VOA News, Machakos, Kenya.
It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, the new Star Wars trailer kicks up an internet frenzy. We'll be right back.
Okay, and you had the third one.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Esther Gido-Ewart. Here's what's trending.
But I've got nothing to fight for.
Nothing will stand in our way. I will finish what you started.
Star Wars fans were given the longest look yet at the upcoming The Force Awakens film on Monday in an action-packed trailer which became the top trending topic on Twitter and sparked a rush of bookings which crashed a U.S. online ticket seller. The trailer quickly attracted more than 17,000 tweets per minute, according to Twitter. It was viewed on YouTube more than 20,000 times within the first 20 minutes. The film debuts in the U.S. on December 18th. Next up, Edward Snowden, the former fugitive National Security Agency contractor who leaked details about the U.S. government's massive surveillance programs, was the keynote speaker at a conference called Why Privacy Matters. The conference was held at a Bard College in upstate New York. Snowden appeared via video link from Russia. His talk focused on government surveillance, encryption, and his massively popular Twitter account, which now has more than 1.5 million followers. And finally, China's economic growth has injected a stream of cash into the country's expanding beauty and cosmetics industries. At the Beijing Beauty Expo, talk was all about being nipped, tucked, and made over to get the latest look. Among the various stands and booths, there are various equipment, gadgets, treatments, and products. Every year, more than 1 million plastic surgeries are performed in China, according to the Chinese Association of Plastic and Aesthetics. The association says the country's medical cosmetology industry is seeing growth of 15 to 20% year on year. For young women, double eyelids and nose jobs are among the most popular surgeries. Others hope to change their lips, chin, temples, or facial shape. And that's what's trending today. Lenore?
That's beauty at all costs. Thank you, Esther. While continuing our series on the 40 African artists on exhibit at the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art in Washington, D.C., we bring you The Divine Part 2, Purgatory. VOA's Caroline Turner has more.
The exhibit representing Purgatory is draped in the color red, which symbolizes guilt. It was guest curated by internationally acclaimed critic and scholar Simone Njami, who says Africa should be included in Dante's 14th century epic drama, The Divine Comedy, which warns of the 7 deadly sins.
Purgatory is what one could call the middle passage. When people enter the exhibition, they start by heaven, and I wanted to play with it. And in Purgatory, there are pieces that are representing what St. Augustine qualified and invented in a way, the 7 capital sins. If you look up, there's this piece by Mohamed Borussia, who's dealing with money. He's showing the making of a coin.
Njami explains that Dante's Divine Comedy portrays purgatory as a place where it is undecided whether the soul will go to heaven or hell. The art reflects the indecision and the torture of the unknowing. Aida Mulena is an Ethiopian artist whose photographs were commissioned and are the signature work in the exhibition.
Each segment, for example, the 7 pieces is also correlating to the 7 deadly sins, but when you look at the white paint, it also comes from our own cultural background in Ethiopia, where we have traditional paintings that, markings that we do on bodies. So for me, this is sort of my contemporary version of that tradition, but in a sort of a self-expression approach of how I see the Inferno, and also really talking about humanity and talking about what's happening in the world. So for me, you don't have to die to go to hell. I think we're living in it, looking at the state of the world and how there are many different issues that are taking part globally.
The Divine Comedy, featuring 40 cutting-edge African artists, will be on exhibit at the Smithsonian Museum of African Art through the end of the month. Carolyn Turner, VOA News.
And that's our Africa 54 show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 300 and 600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching, and good night from Washington.
At stake is the basic human right of the woman and child.
This is a struggle against humanity, and we all need to join hands and do what we can do.
Women are not being heard, so we need to be doing a lot more.
A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I'm Sally Field, and I believe women are the best agents of change. These women from around the world are leading the way to challenge the status quo and motivate the next generation.
Let's move on and take a step in this journey.
Access to preventive care information and access to health care is a fundamental right.
It really makes me think about how I can contribute to the next generation.
These women bring us one step closer to realizing women's rights as human rights. Only on VOA.